Shine.fm presents Stronger Together, a show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationships, and community. Here's Seth Tower Hurd.
This is one of the most amazing guests we've ever had on Stronger Together, but I do want to give you a heads up right up front. We are going to be dealing with some sensitive topics, so if you're hearing this on the radio, you can always grab it later if you want to listen without young ears around by searching Shine.fm podcasts on any place you download podcasts, or search Shine.fm on Facebook or YouTube to see the video. And if you are watching the video, you'll notice I'm in a very colorful place, which I'm actually going to say a very a guest with very colorful arms and legs. Chris Baker joins me. Chris actually does tattoo removal and cover-up for gang members. And again, I'm going to remind you that this is a very sensitive topic, as well as people who have been rescued out of the sex trade industry. Let's actually start with you meeting Jesus, because you're from LA. Yeah. You're a tattoo artist. You're not exactly the typical kind of guy I've got on.
No, not at all.
So you said you and I have met before.
Yeah.
So I'm not totally cold to your story, like, right, as far as I have no idea. But you said you came out here 10 years ago after one of your best friends was killed in LA.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he'd just gotten out of jail. He was a former gang member and came out of jail, and we were having a barbecue for him, and he spent the day telling us how he met Jesus when he was locked up in jail, and this ministry would come in and work with them, and he got baptized while he was locked up and ended up getting his GED and all these things, and telling us he was going to leave the gang. And we didn't believe him, and this was way before I had Jesus in my life. And
you said leave the gang. Does this mean you were...
I was never a part of any gang. Okay. I was what police called a known associate. So they knew I wasn't involved, but they knew that I knew everything that was going on. Yeah. So, they would always come to my house and knock on my door and ask me questions, and I wouldn't answer them. But it was a tough way to grow up. I lost 17 of my friends growing up, and LA was a tough place. And he was killed that night in a drive-by shooting, and I was about 5 feet away from him. I went home that night and told my wife, Lisa, that it was time for us to leave. We wanted a better opportunity for our kids to grow up in a more community-minded environment, much more peaceful. So we decided to move to the Illinois or Chicagoland area where she's from.
And so at that point, what did you think of Jesus? What did you think of Christianity?
Well, my she's Catholic, and so I grew up around that, and she would make us go to church when I was little, but then she got tired of fighting it when I got older. And, I believed in God. I believed in Jesus. I just didn't know him. I didn't have a relationship with him. And I built up walls as often as I could as a young guy. And
so you're where a lot of people live, where it's like, I'm open to the idea of a relationship with God. I just am not sure, I'm not sure where I'm at with it.
Yeah. I grew up and I saw a lot of people that were Christians around me. I just wasn't, I didn't feel pulled to their style of Christianity. It was very judgmental, and, people telling me I was going to go to hell if I didn't stop hanging out with who I was hanging out with and stop getting tattoos and things like that.
Wait, I kind of feel like you didn't stop getting tattoos.
No, it didn't work. I got 81 of them now. So yeah,
81.
I just got my 81st tattoo the other day.
So you, at some point, I guess because of losing your friend, you took a second look at what you really believed and found that Jesus really did love you in a much more personal way than what you'd previously thought, right? Can you give me a brief summary of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know the seed that Dante was planting the day that he died with me, but he really did. And after I moved out here with my family, I went through some stuff in my life. I've dealt with depression and anxiety my whole life, and my wife and I went to a counselor, and at the end of that counseling session, she prayed for us, and I encountered the Holy Spirit that day. The next day I was in church. 6 months later, I was on top of a mountain in Haiti helping to build a school. And I went from 0 to 10,000 miles an hour searching for Jesus, and it was amazing.
So I'm going to fast forward to where we're at right now, because what you do is unlike anything else I've seen somebody do. And I want to remind you, if you're listening to this on the radio, you can grab it later as a podcast, because we are going to go into some very sensitive topics. You do tattoo removal and cover-ups for former gang members and people who've been rescued out of sex trafficking.
Yes, correct.
Okay? And right next to us, I wish we could have filmed in there, but it just didn't work logistically, are hundreds and hundreds of bandanas that have been hung up with people that said, "I'm done with the gang."
Yeah. Yeah, we see it all the time. People change. We all grow up at some point, those that are lucky enough to live and grow out of that life.
Well, and that is something unique about tattoos, because I started in radio when I was 19 in Iowa.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people think I spent my whole career in Christian radio, Christian media, and that's actually not the case at all. I've done a lot on the secular side of things. One of my very early jobs, my boss told me as part of a morning show prank to go to a Walmart and get on the intercom. And I got arrested and banned from Walmart. The thing is I was 19, so that's the only time I've ever been in trouble in my whole life, But it doesn't follow me around now. But if I would have been in a gang and I had a tattoo on my face, that would have, it's like, every job interview I walked into, they're like, so we know within 3 seconds you're that guy that got arrested in Walmart.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah, I get people in here all the time with facial tattoos or tattoos on their neck or their hands, and they come in and they tell me about how their lives are changing. And, like, I just got baptized. I'm really changing my life. I'm doing things different. And I'm out of the gang and I'm moving away from the gang, so I don't have to worry about it. But I can't get a job. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. You have tattoos all over your face. So that's the thing with the ministry. When we started doing this work in 2011, Jesus gave me the scripture of 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, anyone who is in Christ is a new creation. The old has died and the new has come. But it's pretty hard to live out your life as a new creation when you're wearing the physical evidence of your old life. And that's what Inc. 180 is all about. It's about removing those painful reminders of their past, or the tattoos or marks that are keeping them tied to that old life and keeping them from living the life that Jesus has intended for them.
This is Stronger Together. I'm hanging out with Chris Baker of Inc. 180, a ministry that does tattoo removal and cover-up for people from two groups, former gang members and victims of sex trafficking. I do want to remind you, if you're listening on the radio, you can grab this full show later if you don't want to be listening with younger ears around. So you had a revelation at some point. You've been a tattoo artist, I'm assuming, for
25 years.
Okay, so this has been your career.
Time. Yeah.
You were doing it in LA, hanging around with a bunch of gang members. You meet Jesus. Yep. At what point, after really, coming fully into Christianity, did you said that God gave you this scripture? Where did it start? Where did you do your first removal or cover up for somebody that needed a new life?
So when I prayed about this and asked God for my calling, He gave it to me. I went to my wife, Lisa, and I said, I think this is what He wants me to do with the rest of my life. He wants me to start removing these gang tattoos. And she said, okay. Lisa's been very supportive since day one. We've been married 24 years by the grace of God. And she said, where are you going to do this and how are you going to pay for it? And I said, well, we'll set up a studio in the basement of the house, which is very frowned upon, to say the least. And I'll probably only do like 3 or 4 of these things a month, so it's not going to be a big, huge cost involved. And she said, okay. And I set up the studio in the basement. And it's crazy to think back now that I had these guys who were gang members in my house.
And you've got kids.
And I got kids, and they're upstairs doing homework, and Lisa's making dinner while I'm doing this stuff. And anything could have happened. Anything really could have happened, but it didn't. We were protected, and it's amazing to see how God has taken what He gave me and what I thought was going to just be a nice kind of side thing that I did, to help some people out. And since 2011, we've done 4,200 free tattoo removals or cover-ups.
4,200.
Yeah, we average about 7 to 10 a day. So it's pretty busy.
Okay, I know you. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea.
It's crazy busy.
It was going that far. Before we get back to the removals, I do want to just talk about the marriage aspect of it real quick, where, this is not the easiest life. No. You're definitely not getting rich doing a bunch of free tattoo removals. And you are on the road a good bit talking about, the sex trafficking industry. So you're just in New York City, Fordham University.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the marriage aspect of it, of like just what you got to do to like stay strong. I've been around your kids like you. Yeah. Because I've known the children of famous Christians or whatever, people who are in ministry that just said, I had a miserable childhood and pretty much never saw my parents, and I was really screwed up when I got to adulthood.
Yeah. No, my marriage is a key component to everything. Without Lisa's support, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And the kids, we're all very involved in this ministry. We do events together. My daughter, Mackenzie, and I, she's 19 now, but when she was 16, she came to me with an idea of doing a social media safety class. we decided to teach it together. So my kids are very much a part of the ministry, and they're always around here. Tyler goes to school right behind the office here and walks here, over. Yeah. So they're very involved, and I make sure to make time for family. It's, you know, in my old life, I had jobs where I was working 14, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, and my family got whatever was left at the end of that. And I make time for them. They're my priority and a huge part of what we do here.
And I guess I'm not the person who like quotes a lot of scripture on the spot on the show, because it doesn't always flow like that. But just thinking about how Jesus did walk away from the crowd sometimes. You've done 4,200 tattoo removals and cover-ups, but sometimes you just got to walk away and say, you know, no, family, kids, marriage.
Yeah, the thing I say all the time is if you don't make time, there won't be time.
Yeah.
And you have to make time for what's a priority in your life. And definitely.
So let's talk about each one of these groups real quick. So we'll start with the gang members.
Yeah.
How do people even find you to know that you will do this for them?
So on the gang side, there's a lot of different ways. Word of mouth. You know, we've been blessed to be able to do a lot of media things like this. So the word gets out and people will hear and say, oh, my cousin has a gang tattoo, and they'll give them my info. I work with police, you know, local, state, federal, law enforcement, probation, judges. I just got a message from the Will County Sheriff's Department. So yeah, we're out there. People know about us. I give my stacks of my business cards to police officers because they pull people over all the time, and they have, you know, a crown over their eye or teardrops, whatever. And the first thing that person tells the police officer is, oh man, that's not me anymore. I don't do that. I left that life. And it's a bridge for between those officers and the community to say, hey, here's a business card. That's great. You know, I'm glad you're changing your life. Go see this guy. He'll get rid of that tattoo, so you don't have to answer this question all the time. So there's a lot of different ways on the gang side. The sex trafficking stuff is different. Those are mostly referrals from federal law enforcement. So the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Attorney's Office, or safe houses that we work with.
Once again, just a reminder, if you're listening on the radio, you can grab this whole show later if you don't want to be listening with young ears around, as we know these are very serious, heavy topics that Christians need to be aware of, but you know, maybe your kids don't need to be aware of them right now. You can always grab this by searching Shine.fm podcast, where we download podcasts, or search Shine.fm on Facebook or YouTube, and you can pick it up there. Okay. Maybe if somebody doesn't know a lot about the extremely grim world of sex trafficking, they're going to say, why would somebody who is forced into prostitution, why would they have a tattoo? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me either. But basically what's happening is they're marking these victims as property, not any different than a farmer would brand their cattle or livestock. So it's tattooing, but they refer to it as branding. They're just marking them as property of pimps and traffickers.
And a lot of these girls, were kidnapped somewhere. I actually just met somebody that is in import-export, and human beings are imported in shipping containers for forced prostitution, into New York City all the time.
We've heard so many stories of it. So there's that aspect. There's the kidnapping side of it, where there are people who are brought in from other countries, and we've seen evidence of that certainly all over the country. But we're also seeing a ton of our clients that are American citizens. They're just U.S.-born teenagers that a lot of them ran away from home, and they were out on the street, and within 24 to 36 hours, they're met up on the street by a pimp or a trafficker or a gang member, because gang members are becoming heavily involved in the world of human trafficking too. So it's pretty scary. It's a scary time to be a kid in this country.
We're going to stop right there, and then we'll get back into tattoos. So you talk about Runaways, not just for your own kids, but for all the kids in your life. What do, parents, aunts, uncles, adult cousins, grandparents need to know about the way kids are communicating online? Because now it's like, it's not just social networking. It's who you're talking to while you're playing video games.
Absolutely. Yeah, we see that all the time. These online game networks are a huge problem right now. I was just watching a report this morning about this Fortnite game that my kids were playing, and talking about how kids are talking online, and adults, talking to kids online. I've had survivors tell me they met somebody on an Xbox Live chat room, and they started asking for pictures and videos, and it's it's disturbing how something that was made for good, social media, is, being used by a lot of evil in the world too.
So the summary here is you need to know what the kids in your life, like all the methods that they can communicate, not just, do you have a Facebook account? Do you have an Instagram account? That almost doesn't scratch the surface in 2018.
No, I mean, it's all about having open communication with your kids. A lot of people will hand their kids an iPhone for their 10th birthday and say, hey, happy birthday, here's your phone. But they don't look at the apps they've downloaded. They don't talk to them. It's kind of one of those things that if ignorance is bliss, this place is Disneyland, because people almost don't want to know what their kids are doing a lot of the times. And I've heard that from a lot of parents during our social media safety classes.
I'm with Chris Baker of Inc. 180. It's a ministry that does tattoo cover-ups and removal for former gang members and also victims of sex trafficking. So I want to get into actually, what you do when you have somebody in a chair, because if you're taking a tattoo off of them or covering it up so that they can have a new life, you've got sometimes hours and hours and hours to be able to talk to this person. I mean, it's a truly captive audience,
yes,
right?
It is. Yes, it
you got them by
is.
the arm or something.
Yeah, literally.
So what do those conversations look like, and how do you know when God is putting something on your heart to, really share what you believe with somebody?
Yeah, it's been interesting for me. I've actually had people tell me, I was going to come get a tattoo by you, but I didn't really want to get preached at, so I didn't. And people that know me know that that's just not my angle. I never preach at anybody, first of all, but really my most effective tool for ministry is listening. I listen to people. I listen to their stories. I'm an active participant in that conversation. And when they tell me things, I might share something. Often I'll share things that I went through or people that I know have gone through that are relative to where they're at and what they're processing. And but they know, most people that come here know that I'm a Christian. They know what I'm about. They know, especially on the ministry side. So,
well, if you're watching the video, you've got you've got the crucifixion on your neck,
right?
So it'd be a little bit hard to not kind of wonder if something was up.
And I have a portrait of Jesus on my shin.
It's scripture all over your hands.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt, right? And people are seeking that. Like, they want to hear, because they've heard my story or they know, kind of the background. And they're like, well, how did you deal with this? And I'll tell them. And it just opens up a really solid conversation. They'll ask, we'll pray together a lot of times if they're open to it. And I just don't push it. I don't push it on people, and I don't want to ever come across as if I'm preaching to them.
Yeah, and if I can pull something out that you said there about, your best skill being listening. What's interesting is a lot of times Christians think that everybody fits into a box. So you're a Christian, you're an agnostic, you're a Buddhist. And what the research actually shows about life in, the United States in 2018 is that there's actually a good chunk of people who are undecided but open. So it's like, I'm not sure what I believe, and I think that you lived there for a long time. I'm not sure what I believe, but I'm open to the idea that maybe I can have a personal relationship with God. I just haven't decided yet, or I don't know that it's possible. And, I think that all of us need to be praying that those people come into our lives and we have a chance to talk to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I became a Christian, I was 38 years old, and I beat myself up for the first year thinking, man, I wasted 38 good years of my life being ignorant and just being afraid, really, more than anything. I was just afraid. I didn't know which direction to go. And but then it was, through a lot of prayer and thought, and it really came to me that, hey, it took me 38 years to decide what kind of Christian I wanted to be. And I wanted to be that kind that was the one that would listen to people no matter what they've been through. I want to listen to their story and support them and pray with them and just be thoughtful with them. I didn't want to ever come across as if I was judging them for anything, because my old life is ugly. Yeah. And, we all have our old life, our old stuff. So I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm trying to judge somebody. I just want to love people.
Let's get back specifically to the two groups when you're talking to gang members.
Yeah.
And I think it's got to be very easy for somebody in that group of people to say, well, dude, you don't get it. I'm too bad for God to love me. Like, you don't know, man. You don't. And actually, in that case, I mean, there's got to be some very, probably messed up stories that people would say that they're struggling with guilt, and how could God ever love me after this?
I hear that all the time. It's one of the biggest things that I hear. And And I talk him through my old stuff and the things that I did. And I'm like, if God can love someone that was messed up as me, he'll love you too. I mean, there's no scoreboard when you get to heaven that says, oh, you did this and this and this. You got to wait a little bit to get into heaven. But this person from Naperville gets right in because they were good. They only cheated on their taxes. They didn't murder anybody or shoot at anybody, Sin is sin. It's all a mess, and it's all forgiven by Jesus.
Yeah. Dropping the hammer because it's tax time. Like, Christians, don't cheat on your taxes.
It is what it is, right?
According to the Christian tattoo artist. My guest is Chris Baker. He's done over 4,200 tattoo removals and cover-ups for gang members. And I remind you that if you just tuned in on the radio, you can grab this show later because we're also talking about victims of sex trafficking and who have been forced into that world. Mm-hmm. Once again, Shine.fm on Facebook or YouTube, or Shine.fm podcast, wherever you download podcasts, to pick this up if you got young ears listening and you want to finish it later. On the forced prostitution side of things, you have encountered the results of such incredible evil in the world, and you still have to believe that Jesus can redeem anybody.
I do, absolutely, unequivocally believe that. Because I see what he does with them after they're out of that, and pulls them out of a pit that they were in. I was just up at the Super Bowl, and I got a chance to witness a John sting taking place, and I watched 189 men be arrested over a 12-hour period for trying to have sex with a 16-year-old via a fake ad that was posted. And I sat there and listened to these men sob their eyes out after they were arrested. And one of the things my pastor's worked on with me for the last 4 years is being able to pray for those people as well as the victims. And it's been something that I've really struggled with. But at that moment, I was finally able to pray that these men would change. Because it was like God was telling me in that moment, hey, by praying for them, you're not saying to them that what they did was okay. But you're saying that you're praying that they can change their ways and never do anything like this again and learn from it. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life.
Oh,
because I've harbored, I mean, in the era of transparency, I have harbored hatred for Johns and pimps because I sit here and listen to survivors recount what they went through in brutal detail. And, I mean, to the point where I have a really good counselor that I go and talk to every week because I have to then offload the things that they tell me, because if I don't, it hardens my heart and I'm no good to anybody, including myself or my family. So it's, growing up around guys who are in gangs, I saw things that most people will never see in their lives and shouldn't. I've experienced a tremendous amount of loss in my life that's hard enough to deal with on its own. And then you hear these survivors talk about what men have put them through for whatever period of time. And it's absolutely disgusting and horrific. And, when I started doing these sex trafficking tattoo removals, I would drive home at night in tears, wondering how I was going to explain what I just heard to my wife and my oldest daughter. And I would say, please God, it couldn't get worse than what I just heard. And I stopped saying it because every time I would, it would get worse. And it's just like Hollywood could not write these stories. They're absolutely brutal.
My guest is Chris Baker. Inc. 180 has done over 4,200 tattoo removals. Again, if you're just catching the tail end of the show, we are delving into very sensitive and serious subject matter here. Shine.fm on Facebook or YouTube to see the video, or Shine.fm podcast, where we download podcasts to listen later, as we are talking about tattoo removal on gang victims and former gang members. I guess they're not victims, and victims of sex trafficking. So let's talk about some of the stories of new lives that you've seen, right? Because obviously for those who are forced into prostitution, getting something off is a physical, it's like a physical rebirth, a renewal, that they don't have to look at what they're seeing and think, this is what the person who kidnapped me or forced me into this did to me to mark me as their property. Right?
Absolutely.
On the gang member side of things, that's something that can be so hard from kind of some of the work that I've done to go out and, I think it's easy to say, if you've never been in the crime world, well, why can't you just go get a job and be a normal person? Because there's actually a lot of barriers to that, like to getting a job and being a normal person. Because it's like, well, what have you been doing for the last 10 years? Oh, I was in prison. And that makes it harder to get a job, right?
Absolutely.
And then the face gang tattoos on your face, your neck, your hands also make it harder to get a job, right? So
absolutely right.
You've heard some of these stories coming back of like, I was unemployable and, just getting the tattoo off. What have you seen for gang members?
It's huge. It's, when you take away that tattoo, to some that haven't dealt with that kind of stuff, it's hard for them to imagine how much a tattoo could hold somebody back in life, but it absolutely can. I have a gentleman that I'm working with. He just got out of prison. He spent 24 years in prison. He had tattoos on his face. We removed those. We're removing a couple that he had on his arms now. He's got a great job. This guy, like, all he wants to do is work. And, we have a list of employers who will hire people with felony records. And these guys these men and women go in there, and these employers will tell me, these are like the best workers I've ever had in my life. Like, all they want to do is come in and work hard and go home and do a good day's work, It's very, it gives me a lot of hope to see these folks, come out of that life and into a straight life where they felt like they had no other options. They felt like they had no hope before. And now they're working at a job full time. They have benefits. They're able to go to school. A lot of these are companies who will provide tuition reimbursement. So they're going to college, and people are reclaiming their lives, and to be able to see what God's doing in their heart to change them and remove them from that street life and help them go in a straight direction it's a huge blessing to see.
And with Chris Baker of Inc. 180, it's a ministry that's done over 4,200 tattoo removals and cover-ups for people to start new lives. As we wrap up here, last question. Calling. We talked about how this became obvious that this is what God had put in front of you to do. And you've done some crazy stuff over the last 7 years. When people are saying, what is my calling? What does God have for me to do? I'm not a tattoo artist, so I can't go do what you're doing. And please don't try to be an amateur tattoo artist. Please don't do that.
There's enough of those out there already.
Just speak to finding calling, finding the thing that God's put on your heart.
I think we tend to overthink it. I really do. When I prayed to God and asked him what my calling was, it was a very simple response. It was, go do what you love to do more than anything and just do it for free. And it was pretty quick and pretty apparent. I saw these little video clips of earlier parts of my lives where, friends had passed away or friends went to jail and of me tattooing people. And it just clicked. I was like 2 Corinthians 5:17, remove that old life and give them a fresh slate, and it was so easy because I didn't overthink it. And if you ask God what he wants you to do, he's going to tell you. You just have to center yourself and be able to listen for it and be ready for it. And one of the coolest things is a lot of people will say, oh, Chris, you've done so many cool things. I'm like, I really haven't. God's done it all. Like, I just asked him what I was supposed to do, and I listened for it. And he really laid the stepping stones along the path and just continues to bless us with opportunities and ways to grow the ministry. I get to travel across the country and work with some of the best law enforcement folks in the world. We have a RV that we turned into a rolling tattoo studio that we take all over the country. So the Lord has blessed our work, and I'm excited. I look at the last 8.5 years of my life being a Christian, and very, very happy and thrilled with all the things he's done so far. It just gives me excitement for what's next.
My guest on Stronger Together has been Chris Baker. This show is all about growing in marriage, parenting, relationship, and community. This is about community transformation, giving people another shot through tattoo removal and cover-ups for former gang members and victims of sex trafficking. If people want to get involved, it could be that they know somebody that needs your help. It could be that they personally or as a church, as a small group, actually want to, support what you're doing because you are a nonprofit ministry. Yep. Where can they find out more?
Our website is inc180.com, or they can give us a call here, 630-554-1404.
Also, you can find out that in the show notes of the video and the podcast, wherever you access this content online. My name is Seth Tower Hurd. I know this is a heavy one, but I also think this is one of the most joyful topics we've covered of Jesus using his children to transform the lives of people who might not have another shot otherwise. This is Shine.fm.
That was Stronger Together, a show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationships, and community. Subscribe to the Shine.fm podcast to catch every episode of Stronger Together, available on the iTunes podcast app and wherever podcasts are available.